is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Erik Erlendsson.
All right, welcome into the off-season edition of Power Lunch here on the Lightning Audio Network. I am Erik Erlendsson. He is the radio voice of the Lightning, Dave Mishkin, and we got a lot of topics to kind of get to today. Hopefully, we can squeeze it all in within an hour, Dave. Here as we were kind of going over some things ahead of the show with round two underway in the playoffs. Obviously, there's still a lot to get to and wrap up from exit interview meetings, where there was a lot of information that kind of came out of exit interview days on a number of subjects. So this should be a good show. I'm looking forward to it. If anybody's been following my feed on Twitter/X, I also have some subscribers who have donated gift subscriptions. I've already given one away. I've got a few more to give away. We're going to give away one on the show today. So if you have a question, put it in the comments, and we'll pick one later in the show from the comments when we get to the question and answer session. And so if you're a non-subscriber, if you're not already subscribed to my site, send in a question. We'll get to it, and we'll pick out somebody to get one of those gift subscriptions. So thanks to Robin, to Jeff, and to Karen, who between the three of them have donated 5 yearly subscriptions to the website. So this should be a lot of fun. Dave, it's already been a week. It feels like it's been a month since the season kind of came to an end a week ago today with Tampa Bay. I think surprising to a lot of us that they bowed out in 5 games once again. So I'm going to start with you. How have you kind of decompressed from the season?
Well, it has not been a full off season yet. In fact, to explain to the fans why we have a show today, we got some feedback about how disappointed people were that they weren't going to hear us until the start of next season, and in part, wanting more regular power lunch than just if some news breaks. And as I'm saying this, news has broke.
How about
so
that?
I guess it's good that we decided to meet Wednesday. So basically, we're going to do a weekly show. It's going to be more like Block Party or Into the Blue, at least through the end of the playoffs. Because I think, look, there's stuff to talk about relating to other teams, other series. There may be Lightning news, and there is today that we can pass along. So Greg was unavailable today, so thanks for sitting in, Erik, and it's good that you're here because hopefully we'll give out those gift subscriptions to the fans that found us, and we're going to have our usual format in that we're live 12 to 1 on demand. I do believe we're looking at next Wednesday. I don't know if it's going to be Wednesday every week, but stay tuned. So I have had a chance to kind of digest what has happened. And one of the topics that Greg and I were kicking around of the remaining free agents, or of the free agents the Lightning are going to have that are unrestricted and even restricted, who would be brought back. And we were wondering about Jonas Johansson. Wood Johansson was had a couple of good years backing up Vasilevsky with the Lightning, and he had the 20 games at the start of 2 seasons ago where he played 17 of those games as Vasi recovered from surgery. Would he kind of explore an opportunity maybe to have a more expanded role? And the answer is no, because we just got the release that the Lightning have re-signed Jonas Johansson to a 2-year contract extension. So it looks like Johansson just likes being with the Lightning's organization. He understands that all things being equal, he's going to be getting his 20 to 25 games a year and probably not more than that. But he is literally signed up for that. So one box has been checked for the Lightning. They have their backup goalie to Vasilevsky for the next 2 years. It's the same guy they've had for the past 2 years.
Yeah, and it's a 2-year deal, 1.125, I think I saw Steve said, 1.25 cap hit, so he gets a little bit of a
That's
bump
a little bit of a
in
raise
pay.
off
Yeah,
of
a
what
little bit of a bump
he had gotten, which he deserved.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
the Lightning have some wriggle room with the expanded cap this year,
yeah,
but that's going to eat into a little bit of it.
Yeah, a little bit of it for sure. And the goalie market in free agency is always a game of musical chairs, right? It's always a question of who can find a job and where's it going to be. And obviously the Lightning are comfortable with the way Jonas has played, and certainly he's comfortable being here. I think there is something to be said for that too. Having been here for 2 years, being familiar with the surroundings, with his teammates, with the system, all that stuff, I think has helped him. And at the end of the day, he finds a way to get points, right? That's what you ask for out of your backup goaltender, and he's found a way to do it. He had 9 wins this year, had a couple of overtime losses sprinkled in there as well. So when it comes to trying to figure out who's going to get those starts, and we know it's important in today's game to have a goalie behind your number one when you have a true number one like the Lightning do, that's going to be able to get you some points. And I think he's proven, even though the numbers might not be up to what we want to see from a goaltender, but at the end of the day, what matters the most with Johansson is, does he help the team get points when Vazzy's not starting? That answer to me is yes.
It's not an easy lift to be in the role that Johansson has been in. And you can look around the league at the guys that are getting a quarter of the games. If you're getting only a quarter of the games, that means you're getting a steady diet of the second half of back-to-backs. And for a lot of teams, New York metropolitan teams, kind of Northeast teams maybe being the exception, but for a lot of teams not located in the Northeast, usually the second half of a back-to-back is on the road, where you're getting back-to-backs. You're not playing back-to-backs like home. And if you have any significant distance between yourself and your next closest opponent, the Lightning are in that boat, but I think a lot of teams are in that boat. Usually your back-to-backs are road. And that means that the backup is getting the second half. He's getting the tired team in front of him, usually against the rested opponent. And so you got to go in with your eyes wide open. You understand what you're signing up for. The team is going to lean on you to help them navigate through a circumstantial disadvantage. And Johansson has done a really nice job in that role.
Yeah, and it's like, I think he's adapted to it, right? Like, it's not an easy job. You just mentioned it. Just in the fact that, you might be 10 to 12 days between starts, right? Depending on what the schedule looks like.
That's the other part. Yep.
It's not easy. We saw when Evgeny Nabokov came here. Like, he couldn't adjust after being a starter all those years, as a number one guy in San Jose. He couldn't adjust to being a guy who played every, week and a half to 2 weeks. And, when he went in, he just wasn't ready for it. He just didn't have those numbers. And so it can be something that is a skill to learn. Learning to be the backup like this is a skill, and I think Johansson has kind of figured that out a little bit and understand how to practice, how to keep himself sharp during practice, because we know you can't replicate a game in practice. You can just practice as hard as you can and try and treat it as close to a game as possible so that when you are called on, you're ready to go. And I think Johansson has certainly shown that he's capable of doing that over the past couple of years. I was kind of looking at the goalie market that's out there this summer. Like, there wasn't a lot of guys who were scheduled to be UFAs, and the ones who were probably out of Tampa Bay's price range. The Dan Villardis and those kind of guys that, were making over $2 million plus this year. We know with the cap space, the Lightning didn't want to be able to dedicate too much cap space to their backup goaltender.
No.
So I think this makes a perfect fit in a lot of ways to keep some consistency in the goaltending tandem.
So, Eric, we have not chatted since Julian addressed the media. Greg and I talked about it because we were able to air his press conference. But basically the gist of it was Julian likes his team, and he is placing more emphasis on what he saw over a 6-month, 82-game regular season than an 8 or 9 day span of 5 games against an excellent opponent. We're going to get to the Panthers and what happened to them in Game 1 against Toronto. But I think a lot of fans were wondering, are changes coming? Steve just sent me a question, which we'll get to, asking, is the Lightning's window closed? And look, these are fair questions to ask based on the fact that the team has gone out in the first round in 3 straight years, but it's the general manager's job to figure out, like, coming up with the answers to these questions about, like, why did we lose? What direction is the team going? Is our window closing? Like, how do I, as the general manager, react to that? So we got from Julian, at least my interpretation was, he likes his team. He said that, so I'm not putting words into his mouth. He likes his team. He likes how they played this year. And what happened in the playoffs is kind of a confluence of they ran into a really buttoned-up opponent. They had some bad luck with injuries, and some close plays went against them. I'm still going. And they were a little bit off. When you're facing a team that's not really off and you're a little bit off, you're going to be on the short end of things. But does that mean that they're going to be a little bit off if they meet the Panthers again next year? Or does he restructure this team to take on the Panthers? As you asked that question, his response was, well, what if we don't play the Florida Panthers? Yeah. A championship team needs to be able to adapt and play a variety of different ways. So basically the short answer is no. The Lightning are not going to be making big changes unless we hear otherwise. And no, in the eyes and mind of the general manager, the Lightning's window is not closed based on all of the award finalists that they have. Vasilevsky for the Vezina, Kucherov for the Hart. Kucherov's won the Hart Trophy. Cirelli for the Selke. The Lady Byng is the Lady Byng, but Braden Point, like, you have to be a good player. Right. Usually get nominated for the Lady Byng. Point got nominated for the Lady Byng, and Julian said he expects Hedman to be maybe 4th or 5th in the Norris voting. That was my takeaway, anyway, from it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I've seen some people show up in my social feeds who want to try and say this felt a little bit like 2019, right? And I understand that comparison. I mean, there's a big difference between a 62 win team, not winning a playoff game against a number 8 seed, and then what we saw in this series against the Panthers. But I understand the emptiness that's inside because there was expectations. Like, we had expectations. The Lightning were a team that a lot of people picked outside of this market to not just win this series, but get to the Stanley Cup final. We felt like the team had the type of talent and the type of team to get there. So to lose in 5 games, it stings. And I think we heard that in, especially Ryan McDonough's comments coming out of exit interview day, and like, it hurts. So I understand the comparison. But if you look at how this management staff handled the postseason in 2019, I think gives you a little bit of insight to how their thinking is going into this offseason. They feel like they're close. Mm-hmm. And, it was a 1-0 game in Game 2. In Game 4, they're 4 minutes away from closing it out and tying the series. Like, if things go their way, you get a break, maybe, certainly you extend it to at least 6, and who knows after that, right? Like, we don't know. But the analytical way in which Julien Brisebois and his staff approach things is how they're going to approach this offseason. They're going to look at, okay, we feel we're close, but what can we do to tweak things just enough to maybe give us that extra 10% going into the playoffs next season? And look, making the playoffs is not a given. You saw Montreal makes the playoffs this year. Ottawa was a pretty solid playoff team, and I know they fell behind 3-0 to Toronto, but they pushed the Maple Leafs in that series, even getting it to a Game 6.
Very close games after the first one.
3 of them were overtime, right? Buffalo at some point might make a charge. So, the division is deeper, and it's going to be harder to gain a playoff. So not even making the playoffs is not a given. We feel they're a playoff team, but you don't know until you get to the ice. So what can they do to make them just a little bit better? And certainly Julian gave us plenty of that sort of insight when he spoke about the numbers. What was it? Only 8 teams in the cap era have finished top 6 in goals for, goals against, power play, and penalty kill, and none of them won the Stanley Cup. But like half of those teams won a President's Cup, right? Some of them didn't even get out of the first round, and that's why taking this step back and analyzing rather than an emotional reaction is so important if you're in a management position. It's hard to win in the playoffs. We know that. We've seen it. I mean, look at the LA Kings. 4 straight years they've lost to the same team in the first round. Minnesota, they haven't gotten out of the first round the last, I think, 8 times they've been in the playoffs. Like, it can be hard to get out of the first round. I know fans don't want to hear that because the expectation levels that were there. But this is a good team. This has a lot of talent on this team. So I think we're just going to look back and we're going to tweak things. That's how Julian, Matthew Darsh, and Jamie Pusher, the entire front office staffs are going to look at this and just take that more analytical approach as opposed to an emotional reaction.
Yeah, and I'm seeing, so Steve sent 3 questions, and they kind of all overlap. From Burned Oils on YouTube, is this it for the Lightning's cup window? From Tampa Bay, something has to change. There's no way Breezebaugh thought after looking at things that he was pleased with the team. And then Connor, what do we think is the biggest need in the offseason? Do you think they will be aggressive in trading at the draft like last season? So basically these are all along the same theme, which is they lost in the first round. They need to make changes, or do you think that they need to make changes? The last fan was asking us.
Yeah.
And look, it's the general manager's job to be rational and not overreact, but also not stick their head in the sand either. And Julian is not that sort of general manager. Julian is very rational about how he views things, and he was very aggressive last offseason. I mean, there's no way that you can look at what happened with the Lightning last offseason and say that Julian will sit back and do nothing as the default. He felt there were areas he needed to address, and he addressed them. Notably, bringing back McDonough, that kind of fell into his lap, but he executed the trade.
Yep.
He went out and got Jake Gensel, made a bold move of training Sergachev to get a younger defenseman, J.J. Moser, and a prospect in Connor Geeky. And while he wanted to re-sign Stamkos, he was unwilling to waver on what the dollar and term was, so they couldn't reach an agreement with Stamkos, and he was okay to walk away rather than basically relent on what he was willing to give in terms of term and dollars. Those are not the actions of a general manager who is like timid or sitting back. What we heard from him was he is looking at his team. He likes his team. People might be like, how could he like the team that lost in 5 games to Florida? Well, that's where it gets complicated. So how much of this was due to Florida? And if it was due a lot to Florida, you might say, well, how are you going to beat Florida? Well, Florida may not be the same team next year, right? Yeah. No matter what happens to the Panthers the rest of this playoff year, every year is different, right? They're probably going to have more attrition. Are they going to be able to play at the level that they played at against the Lightning in that 5-game set, which was an extremely high level? And are the Lightning going to be as unlucky with the same team coming back next year? I'm not saying it's going to be the exact same team, but if they have the same team coming back next year and they're completely healthy going into the playoff series, whatever playoff series they're in, do you like their chances more? That would be an argument against trying to make drastic changes. And sometimes making changes isn't the answer. Sometimes you can make things worse by trying to make changes because you're like, we need to go back to the drawing board. So to your point, Eric, it is very, very hard to win in the playoffs. I've told this story before. I'm just going to mention it one more time, and then I have another anecdote, and then I think we have a couple more questions. But I do want to get to some of the other series that have gone on in the playoffs. So 2012, Lightning missed the playoffs, and I did kind of an overview heading into the playoffs. And I was looking at the Red Wings because they had made the playoffs for 20 straight years heading into the 2012 playoffs. And that run got extended for a few more years.
Yep.
So I was like, all right, in these 20 years, how have they done? Well, they'd won 4 cups in those 20 years. That's excellent. Like that's, 20%. 20% of the time, they won the Stanley Cup. 4 out of 20, right? Am I doing that right? Yeah. There were 2 other times that they got to the final and lost. And there were 2 other times that they lost in the conference final. So that's 8 times they got to the 3rd round or better, and they won 4 cups. That also means that in 12 of those years, 12 of the 20, they lost in the 1st or 2nd round. Now, look, you want to factor in some at the very beginning as they were getting good and then maybe toward the end. Fair enough. But it just illustrates the point. They had some dynamite teams that lost in the 1st round.
Yep.
Different time. Like there was no salary cap for much of that time. But it just backs up the point. Like, first of all, it's hard to win in the playoffs. And second of all, if you lose in the playoffs, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something flawed with your team. You maybe just weren't able to beat that opponent in a very small sample size for whatever reason. There is the randomness of hockey. There are injuries. The other team kind of hit its stride. You didn't.
Chiefs'
Big
best
plays
friend's
went
the
against
goalie.
you. Ran into a hot goalie. I don't think that happened in this Florida series, but
No.
be that as it may. The other anecdote I'm going to tell you is one that we heard this year from Jack Michaels, who is the broadcaster for the Edmonton Oilers. It was when the Lightning were playing Edmonton coming out of the Four Nations face-off. And Jack joined us, and he was kind of looking at kind of the teams that might make some noise in the NHL. And he's like, to me, this looks wide open.
Yeah.
And he was talking about Winnipeg, which ended up winning the President's Trophy. Now, this has changed since the deadline. They added some players. But Jack was emphatic. He's like, the Winnipeg Jets have the same team that they had last year. The exact same team. Head coach changed. Rick Bowness stepped aside. Scott O'Neill had been the interim coach for a portion of last season. He's a Jack Adams finalist this year, deservedly so. They won the President's Trophy. So, okay, they added Luke Shen at the deadline. They made a couple of other moves at the deadline, but the core of their team is back. It's the same team. Yep. What happened to that team last year? They had a great regular season, and they absolutely imploded in the first round of the playoffs against Colorado. They were supposed to be the shutdown defensive team taking on the high-scoring Avalanche team. They lost in 5, and even the game they won was a high-scoring game. Hellebuck had a nightmare series. The Jets completely became unraveled. What did they do?
Yeah.
Did they blow it up?
No.
And this is a franchise that has not had a lot of postseason success. They really didn't. And they come back this year. They have an even better regular season. And yeah, they were a second away from losing in the first round.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They won their round, right? Like, at the end of the day, they won that series. And, you know, their cup aspirations are still very much alive. But even had they lost, like, there is logic. It's not like the Winnipeg Jets were flawed in some way. They just didn't play well in that playoff series against Colorado. And there was really no reason in the general manager's mind to completely restructure the team, change the identity of the team, pull out really good players because they didn't perform in the playoffs. And they were able to win that series toward the end without Scheifele, one of their top players. And they basically won Game 7 without Josh Morrissey, who played like 2 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, they went into double overtime with 5 defensemen, a couple of whom hadn't really played a lot all year, including Hayden Fleury. So that was an impressive series win for the Jets. Again, this is a normal emotion for fans to be like,
yep,
they got outplayed in the series against Florida. I agree with that. Florida was the deserving victor. Panthers were. This isn't working. Julian's not making that same leap. I think it's more nuanced for him.
Yep,
and he's leaning into all of the good things the team did over 82 games.
And then you even go back to 2 years ago when they lost to Toronto.
I thought they easily could have won that series.
It was the flip. It was the flip of the previous year. I thought Toronto was the better team in 22. The Lightning found a way to win that series in 7 games, including needing an overtime goal from Braden Point in Game 6 just to get to a Game 7. And then the next year they come back. The Lightning, you look at all the numbers, the Lightning were the better team on paper and certainly in the analytics. And Toronto wins 3 games at Amalie Arena, all in overtime. And the Lightning had leads, and we can dissect that. But they lost all 3 of those games in overtime, including the series-clinching goal, which deflected off of 2 skates, including Darren Radish's, and went into the back of the net that ended the series. Right? So that's, to me, that's just today's NHL. Right? Like, you know, going back to your comment about Jack Michaels, I think the Eastern Conference, going from the middle part of the year, was completely wide open. I think you could make a case for 6 or 7 teams in the East to say this team could make the Stanley Cup. Whereas out West, maybe it's 4 teams, right? Maybe it's 5, you know. But I think the East. I mean, you could have made a case for Montreal. I mean, they gave Washington a tough run.
The series were close. I mean, most of them were close. I thought Carolina, New Jersey hung in there, but Carolina, kind of leaned on them, which is how Carolina plays.
Yeah, and you want to talk about attrition, the number of defensemen in New Jersey.
I mean, look, injuries are part of it.
It's part of it.
So a couple more questions, and then let's get to to kind of what we've been seeing in the NHL playoffs. From Michael on YouTube, how do you think the Isaac Howard saga ends? Was really excited to have him on the team, but doesn't seem like he's the right fit for the culture. Well, he himself said he didn't feel it was the right fit. Julian said flat out, they're either going to trade him or they're going to. I didn't realize they get a second-round pick as compensation if the player runs out the clock. So to me, what that means is they will try and trade him, but if they don't get something better than a second-round pick, they just won't trade him. They'll take the second-round pick. But look, this is probably a topic for another show, but I'm not crazy about this rule with the college players getting this much juice and leverage, thank you, to kind of dictate their future. Not everyone agrees with me, but Isaac Howard is basically choosing to take a fourth year of college eligibility and see where things end up. I don't think we're going to have an 11th hour shift here.
No, the door's closed. Somebody would need a key to unlock it to open that door back up. I'm not so sure either side is going to be in that case. I mean, you never say never. The most likely scenario is, maybe the team goes to Howard's agents and say, hey, find a team that has interest. Because I'm not 100% convinced Howard actually wants to go back to school. I mean, he saw a lot of his teammates leave, and I know that, they got bounced in the first round of the NCAA regionals. I think he wants to go pro. He's looked at, I looked at the number of players that were on that national development team. He was a leading scorer, and there's some really good players on that team, including
and
Frank
a lot of
Nazar
them are playing in the
Landers.
playoffs right now.
Yeah, so
we're playing in the playoffs.
I'm not convinced he actually wants to go back. And the NIL is a whole different factor that factors into things nowadays that wasn't there a handful of years ago. But I think the most likely scenario is you go to Howard's camp, find a team that has interest. If you want to play this year, you want to start your pro career now rather than waiting another year and a half. Find us a team. We'll see if we can work out a deal. Otherwise, like you said, he's going to have to wait until August of 2026 to choose his team at that point. And, we know the entry-level contracts are structured. They're all 3 years. Like he might be a 2-year guy by the time he gets to the end of his contract. Yeah. But I think he wants to start his pro career now. So I think that the Lightning will find a way to make a deal work. And, the comparison's right there between Cutter Gauthier in this situation. Flyers got Jamie Drysdale from Anaheim in that trade. I don't know if that's how things are going to work out. But there are ways that this could work out other than just getting that second pick. But at least no matter what happens, you're going to get that second-round pick at worst.
So this question comes from Lightboard, and this is a good segue to a topic I wanted to get to today. Lightboard writes, I think we need to adjust to the Panthers because they know how to play against us and shut us down. They read our plays extremely well, and we didn't have room to operate the way we like. Yes, the Panthers played very well against the Lightning, and the Lightning didn't have a lot of time to try and make plays. If you watch the Toronto-Florida Game 1, what you saw was a Florida team that was making some mistakes they did not make against the Lightning. And we can talk all we want about, okay, well, Toronto's a different way. I understand that. No game is played in a vacuum. But let me run down for you what I saw on these 5 Toronto goals that were scored. 2 of them are on Sergei Bobrovsky. He wasn't muffing saves against the Lightning. First goal of the game, Nylander's shooting from the sideboards. I understand there's a little bit of a screen in there, but give me a break.
Seal it. Seal the post.
Yeah, that is a bad goal allowed by Bobrovsky in the first minute of the first period. Okay, that's goal 1. Goal 2 for Toronto. So the third pair for for Florida had a rough game. Schmidt and Balinskis. I know Balinskis scored a goal, but Schmidt and Balinskis are out there. Toronto enters the offensive zone. There's a shot from the side. It's not really a dangerous shot. Bobrovsky makes the save. There is nobody in front of their net. Nylander is completely by himself. Schmidt and Balinskis are the 2 defensemen. They completely blew coverage. There's not some magic formula Toronto used there. They threw a puck to the net, which, look, you could make the argument maybe the Lightning needed to do that more, but the breakdown, the Panthers were brain dead on that. Yeah. I'm like, where was that team against the Lightning? Nylander's like, yeah, thank you very much. I'm in alone on the goalie. Score. Okay, that's the second goal. Third goal. 2 2-on-1 from the Toronto end. 3 of the Panther players get caught down low. One is a defenseman, which means the one forward needs to make sure he doesn't get caught down low. That one forward was Brad Marchand. As good as the Lundell line was against the Lightning, they had a complete mess up there. And you just scored 2 to make it 2-1.
Yep.
They get 3 guys caught down low. And I'm sorry, this is not some like strategy Toronto had that the Lightning can't figure out. You know, like Florida just made a mistake. They made a mistake on coverage. Marchand gets caught a little too down low. Outlet. Riley's got a 2-on-1. The one guy back actually played it pretty well. I think it was Mikkola. And Riley has to take the shot. And that's not a great goal from Bobrovsky.
Yep.
Riley's on his strong side. He beats him short side. Riley can shoot the puck. But Panthers need a save there. I'm not even counting that as a bad goal. That's a horrific coverage problem for the Panthers. You're allowing a 2-on-1 where one of the guys on the rush is a defenseman from your own end.
On the shift after
we
the goal,
did not see that team.
Yeah.
That team was not existent in the series against the Lightning. That was goal 3. Goal 4, Bobrovsky. Face-off win, goes to Tanev, wrists it to the net. I understand it. Skipped off the ice. Bobrovsky blew it. And then the 5th goal, which to me was the chef's kiss on this one, all right? So it's 4-1. Florida rallies. They make it 4-3. They're sniffing, right? Toronto got away with a penalty, actually, on that play where Reinhardt's driving the net. He got tripped. They didn't call it. Okay. So Panthers are pressing. They're trying to tie the game. Puck comes around the boards. Marner bumps it forward. Matthew Knies gets a breakaway. Scores on the breakaway. Watching this play, I'm like, where's the 5th Florida guy? Like, I see 3 deep in the offensive zone, and then Schmidt can't stop the pass to Knies. I'm like, wait a minute, I only count 4 guys. Yeah. They had 4 guys on the ice.
Yeah.
And not just for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Literally, Knies skates past the Florida bench, and Belinskas jumps off the boards. Are you kidding me?
I couldn't believe that, too.
All right, so I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek on this. And it's not like Toronto gave up some goals too, where maybe the goalie needs to make a save or they had a problem. Okay, we'll see how the series goes from here. But for these fans who saw the Panthers play at a certain level, and they are basing what the Lightning should do in a big-time major way, like potentially franchise-altering decisions based on how the Panthers played in a 5-game series where they played very, very well and made hardly any mistakes. They are human too. Very next game, I mean, that had to be one of their worst defensive games, certainly of the playoffs. I mean, I don't even know when they've played so badly defensively. They didn't have a great regular season, but I was reading some of Paul Maurice's comments. It's like, that was not us, right? Like, he's right. That probably wasn't them. But look, they're human. They made mistakes. If we were to project a series next year, let's say the teams meet again in the first round, do we know that the Panthers are going to play as well as they did in this 5-game series?
Yep.
No, we don't. We just saw them play a very poor defensive game. I just gave you the 5 goals they allowed. Bobrovsky was human. They made mistakes. They didn't have a 5th guy on the ice. Are you kidding me?
Yep. When you're pressing. When you're trying
and
to get
Maurice
yourself
even
back
said,
in the game.
like, okay, we were down. You know, sometimes you give up stuff that you don't normally give up. All of that is true. But at the end of the day, like, that's just one game. We have other stuff that we can talk about that we've seen in the playoffs. But weird stuff can happen in the playoffs. I actually asked McDonough. I was only there for 2 of the players, but that in the media session. But I asked McDonough, it wasn't just the Lightning, like teams that were really good defensively during the regular season, not just this year, but in past years. Sometimes in the playoffs, things go sideways.
Yep.
We saw it with LA against Edmonton. Winnipeg, the best defensive team in the NHL, had 3 really bad defensive games in St. Louis. And I mentioned the series last year against Colorado, and I'm like, why do you think this happens? He's like, the playoffs are just, they're just different. Yeah, it can, momentum.
Yeah.
Like, things start going against you. So, we'll see what happens moving forward in this Florida-Toronto series. But if the Panthers, what I said after the Lightning series against the Panthers, if the Panthers play like that, they're going to be hard to beat. They played nothing like that in game one, and they were frankly easy to beat.
Yeah.
2-on-1s, bad goals against, breakaways. I don't care who you are. You're going to have trouble outscoring those sorts of problems. So we'll see what happens moving forward in the series, and we can get into the whole Stolarz thing too, because I know that's a hot topic, and I have some thoughts on it. But I'm bringing this up more in the context of the Lightning.
Yeah.
And like, how much should we base future decisions or recommendations for decisions, if you're a fan, on what we saw over an 8-day span?
Yep. And that's exactly it. That's just how Julian operates, right? Like, he just takes a step back. Okay, let's analyze this, and then we'll discuss what needs to be done or what can we do to, give ourselves a better chance. You can't guarantee anything, but to give ourselves a better chance next time we get into this situation. And, so that's just the way they are. And, I've been preaching this for years. Everybody wants to, kind of give me some grief because the team might go into a 3-game losing streak in March and, it's guaranteed they're out in the first round. No, the playoffs are just different. It's the same opponent every night. It's the same matchups for the most part, just about every night. Teams devise game plans to attack certain teams a certain way rather than, okay, we got to worry more about ourselves. It's different in the playoffs. You'll see it. Maybe they want to attack a certain defenseman. So where does the puck keep getting dumped into? The guy that might have some problems getting the puck out of his own end. They're going to attack until he learns to beat you. Right? There's different strategies that go into the NHL playoffs. And, so what might be a great – I think one of those Detroit teams that you mentioned, didn't they – that was the year they set the NHL record in wins. And I think they got upset by San Jose that year. Right? They lost.
Well, the year that Detroit won 62 before the Lightning tied them, they had a tough first-round series that they won, and then they lost in the second round to Colorado.
Yeah, so you're.
But that was one of those years they went out, and there was a year they got upset by San Jose in the first round.
Yeah,
you're right.
So it's just the playoffs are they're hard. That's why it's the hardest trophy in sports to win. Not just the physical part of it, and the stories of guys like Doug Gilmour losing 20 pounds throughout the course of a playoff run. Right, like you hear stuff like that. That's how grueling and a grind the NHL playoffs can be. There's randomness. There's so much that goes on. So, but let's touch on the Stolarz situation.
Yeah.
We saw certainly some of this in the first round for, Florida, and it's part of what they try and do. Just little nuances to their game that might be right on the line. Some say they cross it. And the situation here is Bennett kind of came in the crease after Stolarz had already taken a puck directly off his mask earlier in the game that knocked the mask off, knocked the strappings loose. And then Bennett comes through with wasn't a forceful elbow, but there was contact there for sure. Not to me. I know everybody wanted Bennett suspended. That was never going to happen because it wasn't a forceful type of hit that would warrant supplemental discipline. It's probably a call missed on the ice. And now, we saw a video of Stolarz vomiting at the bench, which if you have a concussion, I'm saying we don't know that, it hasn't been diagnosed, but we can kind of put 2 and 2 together here. If you start to have vomiting issues from a concussion,
and taken out on a stretcher, it was reported in the third period.
You're in trouble, and that's what happened. And certainly that's been the topic du jour over the past 48 hours heading into Game 2 tonight.
So here are my thoughts on the situation. I mean, what's adding a wrinkle to this is Stolarz played on the Panthers last year, was the backup, and a lot of the Panthers genuinely like Anthony Stolarz. Not that should make a difference, but, Bennett was even saying, he's a friend of mine, and I believe him. So I did not feel that the Bennett contact was not flagrant. It may have been accidental. It may have been. I mean, he bumped him. Probably should have been a penalty because he did go into the blue paint and made contact with the goalie, which you're not supposed to do. Here's the problem. So first of all, Stolarz is injured. And so as we talked about when Michael Bunting elbowed Chernak in the face or Ekblad, concussed Brandon Hagel, whatever the supplemental discipline, whatever the penalty, however you want to talk about what the league and the officials are doing is almost a separate category from the fact that the player who absorbed the contact is out. No penalty or suspension is going to bring that player back to health immediately.
Yep.
The hit did the damage. Now, this may have been a secondary hit. Like you mentioned, Reinhardt takes the shot, hit him in the mask. What I've heard about concussions, and I don't really know too much about them, but enough former players have talked to me about it, is that like the head-on hit is actually, less problematic often than the side-to-side. So the head-on one was the Reinhardt shot, which was a very hard shot, knocked his mask off, but that was straight. The Bennett one is to the side. It didn't look like there was much contact there. But here's the problem that is caused by this, separate from the fact that Stolarz is injured. I'm sorry, if he was vomiting on the bench and taken out on a stretcher, I will be very, very surprised if we see him in this series.
Yep.
I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's able to recover. But I would be very surprised if we see Anthony Stolarz for the rest of this series.
And you figure it's at least a minimum week.
Right. Here's the problem. Sam Bennett has done these sneaky hits before. So he may not have intended to do it, but he has a history, enough of a history, notably Marchand, where we've seen this before.
Blake Coleman.
So that was not subtle at
That was
all.
blatant.
I mean,
Yeah,
that was
sure.
blatant. But it's almost like, let's say Barkov did it. Barkov's like, I didn't mean to do it. I think everybody would be like, Barkov didn't mean to do it, right? It's Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett has enough of a track record and a history here that even if he didn't really mean to do anything, enough has happened with him in the past that there are going to be questions, and he's probably not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Now, the DOPS probably looked at it and were like, this isn't really a suspendable play, even though there was an injury that resulted from it. But this feeds into the Panther narrative, where whether it's Nico Mikkola or Kulikov last year against Wenberg, Ekblad this year against Hagel, this instance, Bennett last year against Marchand, like we see this happening repeatedly with this team, and some of them are just at the line, maybe just over the line. Some of them are suspendable plays, and sometimes the players are suspended. Sometimes they're not. But I think that factors in too. It's not like Sam Bennett is the only guy in the Panthers that has had questions about, is the Department of Player Safety going to get involved? So I think it was less about the contact and more about everything that has led up to this moment.
Yes. It's like you tell people, once you violate their trust in you, you have to build it back up, right? So when Sam Bennett says that, well, we have a track record that makes us think, well, okay, maybe you didn't, but past actions tell me that you might have, right? Like it's, okay, I don't trust you anymore. I don't trust what you say anymore because of things that you have done in your past. It's like knocking down a brick wall. You have to slowly put the bricks back in place to build up that trust wall. And they just, I think a lot of players on the Panthers don't have it. I mean, we certainly know the hit that Tkachuk put on Jake Gensel at the end of Game 3, right? And then you saw the video the other night, final 5, 6, 7 seconds of the game, Tkachuk's going after Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
Like he's literally trying to not necessarily chase him down, but he's going out of his way, including sticking his knee out at one point to try and hit Mitch Marner in a game that's already been decided. Right, it's the final seconds of the game. I mean, look, it's one thing. Like we remember well the Calgary Flames in 2004. If they lost a game, they were starting skirmishes. Right, at the end of every game that they lost, they would try and start a skirmish to quote unquote send a message for the next game. This is completely different. This is a completely different way of going about it. When you're changing the path of what you're skating to try and go out of the way to purposely hit somebody. And again, the Tkachuk hit, somebody referred to it as a scummy hit, right? It's a scummy hit, but it's not an illegal hit. And you got a 5-minute major for it, 5 minutes left in the game. It's a meaningless penalty at that point, other than you just get him off the ice, he can't do it again. But I mean, there's tactics there, and I think they go beyond the tactics of what we're kind of used to seeing in the playoffs, and the fact that they're now playing Toronto, maybe there's more of a spotlight on it.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
More people
Eric.
are watching.
Well, and you have the head coach of the Leafs saying that was an elbow to the head, and so I mean that's gonna rile people up. So we'll see what happens in this series, both in terms of the personnel and look. I mean, I'll say the same thing about the Panthers that I said about the Lightning after Game 1, where I know Julian said we didn't give them anything, but that's not completely true because what they gave the Panthers was extraordinary in terms of the chances they generated. And yeah, they made some plays, but I mean, the game was 6-2 Game 1. So, I mean, that was a lopsided loss. The Lightning had some major defensive mistakes. The Panthers are going to need to play better defensively. And if they don't, they are not going to win the series.
Yeah.
Or they're going to have to find a very different way of winning the series than they did against the Lightning, where the chance number was low for much of that series on both sides.
Yep.
A couple other series that are very interesting to me. First of all, the 2 Game 7s were two of the most exciting Game 7s that you can probably remember in recent history. I think I had read there are only 3 instances prior to this year of a team winning a Game 7 where they trailed in the third period by multiple goals. And both teams that won Game 7 this year, Dallas and then the next night, Winnipeg, were trailing by multiple goals. And I mean, again, it's just wacky stuff happens in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Wacky stuff happens. Game 6, the Avs get the game-winning goal when a Dallas player shoots it off another Dallas player and it flutters past the goaltender. What happens on the tying goal for Dallas? Rantanen tries a wraparound and it goes off Sam Girard and in. So I thought the key play, there were a few key plays in that Dallas-Colorado game, but the Avs gave Rantanen room on the first goal, and that was to me, that was, I mean, they were all key, but that was the key goal. And they gave him room. I mean, right in the middle of the ice. It almost looked like 2 Avalanche defenders got caught up with one Dallas player, and that Dallas player was able to push both of the Avs defenders away. That gave Rantanen room. And you give a guy like that space, he can make you pay.
Yep.
They got a break on the second goal. There's no question. And I'm usually not one to say this, Eric. I did not like the penalty on Jack Drury that put them on the power play. It was a hold.
Yeah.
But you're late in the third period of Game 7 in a 2-2 game. And, Greg and I have gone back and forth on this. Greg is a big believer. Like, if it's a penalty, call it a penalty.
Yep, that's me.
I get that. But he grabbed the Dallas player and, they fell to the ice. We see plays like that a lot. And it did not have any bearing on what was happening on the ice. I mean, it was a face-off win for Dallas, so maybe I'm wrong about that. The fact that it led to the game-winning goal, though, that is a very tough call to go against Colorado. I'll put it that way. That is a very – like, if you're an Avalanche fan, you're like, I cannot believe they called that penalty. But they called the penalty. You have to kill it. And I don't think it was an easy play for Blackwood, but on the winning goal, puck goes right through the blue paint.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be aware, like, if he opens up his stick to anticipate it, he might leave room for Duchesne, who is the puck, to score. We've seen Duchesne score from there before. He has to kind of hold his ground, but at the end of the day, the puck goes right through the blue paint. That's the goalie's territory.
Yep.
Pass goes through, and Johnson has an open net. So that was the one Game 7. And then the one the next night was even more improbable, where I know my head would have exploded if I was calling the Blues there, because they had the game. They were talking about it in the intermission. It was Buchnevich. He has the puck.
Yep.
All he has to do is, like, he could skate it out. He can play it into space. Don't worry about the empty net goal.
Yep, got selfish.
He goes for the empty net or it's an icing. I mean, if they don't score the empty netter there and they just push it down the ice, who knows if Winnipeg can get back in the offensive zone cleanly.
Yep.
I mean, that was just one mistake, but it was, I mean,
yeah. So
that was a significant mistake.
Yeah.
That the panel was talking about during the intermission.
Yeah. Well, me and Kevin were both sitting on the couch watching the end of the game. Both of us at the same time went, "Oh my!" Like as soon as that puck went in, like we couldn't believe the mistake that was made. But going back to the Dallas-Colorado game, let's also not forget Colorado had a power play. About 10 minutes to go. Matt Duchene got called for a tripping call. He can't open them. Stuck the you have to call that, right? So they had a chance to put the game away. They would have given them a 3-1 lead there. They didn't convert, and then Dallas gets the tie and goal.
And they
on
took
power
a
play.
penalty.
Yeah,
Wasn't somebody broke a stick or dropped a stick?
Yeah,
And,
So
they got caught a little bit in transition. That was a legit penalty.
Yeah,
I'm not disputing that.
I don't have a problem with that penalty, the holding call, because you put your hand around a player and you pulled them to the ice. Like, if that's a penalty in the first period, it should be a penalty in the third period. Like, I don't mind that. I understand, it's game 7, it's a tie game. Like, I get all the circumstances, but to me, that's kind of what we give officials in this league issues with sometimes. Well, why did you let that go? Why didn't you want to decide the outcome of the game? Well, by not calling it, you may have decided the outcome of the game as well. So I mean that's the boat that I'm in. I understand in a close game, game 7, you don't want a power play goal to be the deciding factor, but don't put yourself in a position for the officials to call.
And
it.
that's fair. I just felt like at that point
it
it needed to be. I guess I felt it needed to be more flagrant than what it was, but that's a point open for debate for sure.
Yeah,
and I have no counter to your opinion. Or if Greg were on the show, he would probably say the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
But here's the other thing that we've learned about this year in the playoffs. No lead is safe.
Yeah.
Like, no lead.
How many third period comeback wins did the Oilers have?
Well, I know I saw the stat last night. They're the first team in NHL history to win 5 consecutive games when trailing.
Now, one of them was 1-0 after the first, but still, it counts, right?
It counts as a comeback win. But I think the other one that I saw, and I was trying to find it before we came on the show. I couldn't find it, but if I remember seeing it last night, I think there's been 12 instances already in the playoffs where the team leading going into the third period did not win the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
including
unheard
the Lightning.
Of. Yeah, that's unheard of. Like, that's like, I mean, what was the Lightning's record this year when leading after 2 periods? Like 35-1-3.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Toronto, I think, only lost 1 game in regulation when they were leading going into the third period all year long. Like, we've talked about lockdown defense in third. I know it was a different
to Washington
time.
last night.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably should not have been up in that game, but.
But, I know it was a different time, but you go back to 2004, and this is, pre-lockout and the crackdown on the penalties and everything. But if you had a lead in the third period of the playoffs that year, forget it. You're not coming back. It's just not going to happen. And then you look at it this year and you see, 10, 11, 12 games already. We're only 1 game into each series in the second round, with the exception of Dallas Winnipeg, which will have their game 1 tonight. And we've already seen these number of teams come back after trailing in the third period. I know it's the league of comebacks now, but I didn't see this coming in the postseason. Like, no way would I have thought in today's day and age, even as open as it is and everything else, that we would see this many teams in the postseason be able to erase not just third period leads, in some cases, multiple deficits going into the third period.
We'll see if this continues as the playoffs progress, but as I say that, we've already seen it in the second round.
Yeah.
Edmonton did it to Vegas last night. Carolina did it to Washington last night. So I don't know. And the other part of this too, like the Kings are on the receiving end of the first, 4 of those, right?
Yeah.
Games 3, 4, 5, and 6, where they had a lead. I know in 3 and 4 were the games where they lost the series.
Yep.
They could have swept the Oilers. But even in game 1, they had a big lead in the third period, and they blew the lead, and then they had to score. They ended up scoring late to reclaim the lead and get the win. But the Kings are one of the best defensive teams in the NHL all season. I understand you're taking on McDavid, Draisaitl, and Evan Bouchard. I mean, they can fill the net for sure.
Yeah.
But you figure that this is right where they would want to be, leading in the third period in a playoff game. If any team could lock down the opponent in the third period of a playoff game, it would be a team that ranked second in the NHL in team defense and had a Vezina finalist, Darcy Kemper, and they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I am curious to see the Carolina-Washington series. We know how Carolina can play. I think Carolina probably should have gotten to a Stanley Cup final at this point with Rod Brindamore as head coach. They had a couple of trips to the conference final. The year that they lost to the Panthers, they lost 4 very, very close games that honestly could have gone the other way.
Yep.
But they didn't, right? So other years they've been lights out at home and cannot win on the road. And that's kind of been their Achilles heel. Factoring in as well, they've always had a good penalty kill in the regular season. There have been years in the playoffs where their penalty kills let them down. There's been one thing or another. Injuries, sometimes they've lost a goalie. Glad Freddie Anderson, who got hurt in the first round series, is back. He played last night. Very rare, though, to see the Carolina Hurricanes play the sort of game that we usually see at home on the road. I think attempts at the end of that game, and they won it early in overtime, were 96-36.
Yeah.
This is going into Washington's building and completely dictating the terms of how that game was going to be played. That's what we usually see from Carolina at home. And even at home, 96-36 is crazy. The Capitals are going to have to figure something out quickly.
Yep. Yeah,
or else they're going to be in big, big trouble.
I saw the zone time in that game. It was like they tracked the amount of time the puck is in the zone. At one point, it was like 15 minutes to like 2.
Yeah.
That's how much time was in Carolina's offensive zone compared to Washington's.
I think they had the Caps with 9 scoring chances. It was overtime, so the game hadn't ended yet, but they put a graphic up. 9 scoring chances, but 5 were off the rush, including the goal that they scored. So they just basically had no time in the offensive zone to do much of anything.
And Carolina can do that, right? They're smothering in the way that they play the game. I'm looking forward to the start of the Dallas-Winnipeg series. Mm-hmm. Right.
That's how much did that first round series take out of either one of those teams?
Yeah. At least they're both on even ground, right? Like
I think Jason Robertson's expected back too, which is going to be big for Dallas.
Yeah, that's huge. I know he took line rushes yesterday, and at some point they're expected to get Heiskanen back.
Yeah. So McKinnon had this comment after losing Game 7. He basically said they were without their best defenseman and they were without their best forward. You might get an argument. Is Robert? He's one of their best forwards. I'm not sure if he's their best forward, especially now that they have Rantanen. But point taken. He's saying we couldn't beat them. So when Julian talked about the injuries the Lightning had, he's like, you have to be able to win in the playoffs without some of your guys.
Yeah, because
now they've played without Heiskanen for the second half of the year, but still.
Yeah.
Credit to I'm basically complimenting the Stars.
Yeah, and to lose Robertson in Game 82.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Game 82 where he was injured, and they knew that they were probably going to be without him for at least the start, if not the entire series. As it turned out, he missed the entire series. So that's kind of a shocker to the system.
Mm-hmm. And what's Morrissey's status, too?
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I know Scheifele was on the ice this morning. I believe I did see Morrissey was on the ice, but they were in regular color jerseys. But we know this time of year,
yeah,
you don't know what kind of gamesmanship is kind of going on. But at least both those guys were on the ice this morning. That's a good sign for Winnipeg. But can Hellebuck rebound from the numbers suggested? He didn't have a very good first round, and he was obviously pulled 3 times all on the road. It's when you get pulled in the playoffs, it's different than when you get pulled in the regular season. But can he bounce back? Can he be the guy that many people think could win the MVP this year? I know he's a finalist for it, and Jay Gottinger has shown that he can step up in big moments and perform for his team. And I just think that series is going to be a very just like first round against Colorado. I think it's going to be a long, fun, entertaining series between those teams, and I can't wait for that one to get started tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you for sitting in, Eric. The hour went by quickly. We had a lot
Always
to cover.
Does. Yeah.
But again, this will be a regular weekly occurrence through the playoffs because we'll have stuff to talk about. And the Lightning may end up signing more players that they have already kind of under their umbrella because they hold a player's rights until July 1.
Yep. Yeah.
For the unrestricted guys. Yeah.
By the way, Steve, if you want to pick out, because you sent us all
those
questions.
Let's do the winners.
Yeah, you have them all. And I don't want to show any sort of a bias in picking this. So, Steve, if you could just send me a name that you felt had the best question or the best comment or whatever, and we'll pick out that person to win the subscription. Again, for people who maybe jumped on in the middle of the show, I had 3 people donated yearly subscriptions to my site, lightinginsider.com. Robin, Jeff, and Karen all donated a total of 5 subscriptions. I've got 4 more to give away, so I'm going to give away one here on the show as we kind of go through this, and if I can guide, if Steve can pick one out for me. But yeah, so what will you do, Dave? Will you? I asked you about decompressing, I went all in over the weekend. I went to the Strass Center on Friday night.
Oh, good for
we
you.
had friends gave us tickets to go see a concert at Busch Gardens on Saturday. I went to a movie on Sunday. Me and the boys went to the Tampa Bay Sun game on Sunday night. I kind of got in some things.
You're making me tired just hearing about all your activity.
Yeah, so just some things that sometimes I don't have a chance to do during the regular season because, as you know, the schedule's so busy.
Yeah, well, I've been out with Stella. She's snoozing right now next to me. We've been out the last couple of days for therapy dog visits to Tampa General, and I mentioned at the end of the show that Greg and I did last week. Project Audiobook is on the docket for me with
nice.
Over my left shoulder here, a blind squirrel, because I've had some requests from people, and I know you've experienced this too. Like, some people just prefer to listen in the car, right? And that's now a thing. Like, you can do that. So after getting some feedback from people who are like, no, you don't actually need to get like actors to do it. Often authors do their own, especially like nonfiction. I get it. Authors do their own nonfiction, but fiction, where there's dialogue and you need to have some chops to perform, I guess. I think but they recommended that I do it, so I'm going to do that this summer.
Yeah, well, that should be cool.
It'll be available on Audible.
Okay, all right. Steve has us a winner.
Yeah,
Anthony from YouTube. So I assume, Anthony, you're not already a subscriber. Hit me up. Send me an email to Erik@lightninginsider.com. Again, it's ERIK@lightninginsider.com. Send me your email with an email and just give me a couple of brief, just little information that I can set up an account for you, and it'll be good for 1 calendar year. So congratulations to Anthony. Thank you, Steve, for picking one out for us, and it's a good way
it's
to
great
end up
content too, fans. I mean, I'm not saying this just because Erik is doing the show, but if you listen to Lightning Radio, you hear enough of Erik to know he knows his stuff. And there's really here's a $10 SAT word for you, but there's really a dearth of content out there. There is. I mean, if you want to read information about the Lightning, there are limited places to go. Just a different world than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And your site is one of them. So congratulations to Anthony, but I hope other people, if they haven't already signed up, sign up. And you've been busy too, because I get your stuff. And, you've been producing basically an article a day. You had a lot of content, as they say, in the can, right?
Yeah, there's still a lot to go through.
Day.
Nikita Kucherov had a lot of great stuff to say after. I haven't even touched on the injuries that the team had, and I know every team has injuries, but they certainly had their lion's share of them as well. That I'm going to get to. It's the coming days. We'll be out of town this week. My wife's aunt passed away, so we're going up for the funeral in Ohio tomorrow morning. So I'll be on hiatus for a couple of days. But yeah, there's still a lot to get to. The Johansson signing, there'll be more of that stuff to come. You're leading up to the draft, which is just a little over a month away at this point. Like, the off season's comes at you pretty quick, and there'll be a lot to cover, not just here on the show for you guys, but around the team as well. So it'll be a somewhat busy off season, I think.
Great to be with you, Erik. We'll talk to you soon.
All right,
and
thanks.
For the fans, Greg and I will be back, we think, next Wednesday, but keep your eyes and ears open. For those of you who got the 11th hour notice and contributed, thanks. Thanks very much for tuning in.